January 25th, 2010. For nearly 3 months, investigators in Polk County, Florida, have been trying to locate lottery winner Abraham Shakespeare. Now they found his body beneath a concrete slab behind a simple brick house along a busy rural highway. And they're talking to the woman who they think put it there, Dee Dee Moore.
I did not have that man killed. There is no motive. There is no reason why.
There's plenty of motive. There's plenty of motive.
I wouldn't do that to
There's
another
over $3 million worth of assets of motive.
Moore's story starts years earlier in the quiet town of Lakeland, Florida. In a letter to American Greed, she says it's a tale so far-fetched that she would not even believe it if she was not living through it firsthand. On November 15, 2006, Abraham Shakespeare is working on a truck as a delivery assistant for a food distribution company in Central Florida, where he's lived for 40 years. The truck's driver, Michael Ford, stops at this convenience store in the nearby town of Frostproof to buy a drink and cigarettes. Shakespeare asks him to pick up 2 tickets for that night's $30 million Florida Lotto drawing. Then he waits.
So tonight's Florida Lotto winning numbers are 12, 13, 42, 6, 52, and 34.
After years of playing the lotto, Shakespeare finally hits the jackpot. He takes home a lump sum payment of nearly $13 million.
What is it?
Dave Clark is a detective in the Polk County Sheriff's Office.
I think it was the best thing that ever happened to him and the worst thing that ever happened to him.
Shakespeare treats himself. He purchases a $1.1 million mansion and a BMW worth $100,000. But Centoria Butler, Shakespeare's former girlfriend and the mother of his youngest son, says he was always more interested in spending the money on others.
He went from being considered a nobody to everybody needs him all of a sudden.
Shakespeare reportedly gives out money to random strangers at the bank he frequents. He pays for people's burials, groceries, rents, and helps those in danger of losing their homes.
People that barely knew him, former co-workers, would go to Abraham with a sad story and say, hey, I have a family, my house is about to get foreclosed on, and he'd say, how much do you owe on it?
According to Polk County Detective Chris Lynn, he buys approximately 10 homes, then has the owners make payments directly to him.
I didn't necessarily see it as a money-making scheme. He wasn't charging these people any more money than what they could afford. It was just generosity on his part.
But the way Shakespeare doles out money may be attributed to something more than plain generosity. With nothing more than an 8th grade education, it's said that he has difficulties with large numbers and financial concepts. Marissa Green covers Shakespeare's story for the Lakeland Ledger from the time he wins the lotto.
It was so easy for people to take advantage of Shakespeare. Matter of fact, everybody who knew him did.
Michael Ford, the driver of the truck who picked up the winning ticket, claims in a lawsuit that Shakespeare stole the ticket from him. A jury sides with Shakespeare, but he is hardly relieved. His mother says he changes his phone number, and he reportedly says, I'd have been better off broke. By the end of 2008, he's lent out, given out, or spent all but $1.5 million of his $13 million jackpot. That October, he's introduced to Dee Dee Moore at a Red Lobster restaurant. She's been researching him and asks his realtor to set up the meeting. According to Polk County Detective Dave Wallace,
Abraham sees this white lady who's driving a nice car, who's dressing well. She appears as kind of the knight in shining armor.
Moore says she runs a nursing staffing company that's made her a very wealthy woman. She tells the lotto winner she wants to write a book about how people are taking advantage of him. To Shakespeare, she must appear to be a successful businesswoman, someone who doesn't want or need a handout.
She would do stuff like, oh, let's go to the casino, and she would pull up in a limousine. Being that he always took everything at first sight, I think he believed that she really had money.
The lotto winner brings Moore to his mansion. She learns that even though he's a millionaire, Shakespeare is behind on his mortgage. In what appears to be a selfless act of kindness, she makes the approximately $7,000 payment for him.
Everybody asked him for money. Nobody ever gave him anything. And here she steps in, and a person on the outside looking in might say that's a nice gesture. That's a caring person. But that was part of her whole plan. I mean, that was the hook. And she was setting it.
When she befriends lotto winner Abraham Shakespeare, Dee Dee Moore claims she's doing it out of the goodness of her heart. But what Shakespeare doesn't know is that she has a history of lies and frauds. As her father will later put it, she tells the fibbiest fibs.
If you look here, it's definitely her signature.
Detectives who investigators see it in a slightly harsher light.
I think Dee Dee Moore was the most manipulative, cunning, pure con artist, evil person I've ever come across.
In one instance, Moore is alleged to have set a fire to avoid an embezzlement investigation. In another case, after falling behind on a car payment, she hatches a plan.
She ties herself up, throws herself in a ditch, and calls and says that she was carjacked and some Hispanic guys attempted to rape her and left her for dead in a ditch.
None of that happened. She had set this whole thing up basically as an insurance fraud to get a payoff on the car and to keep the car.
Moore pleads guilty to making a false report, and a judge gives her a year of probation. With Shakespeare, she has her own plan. She convinces him the IRS is going to come after him for the unreported loans he's been making. And she stokes the fear that his one-time girlfriend, Centauria Butler, is going to sue him for child support.
So she scares Abraham thinking, hey, you're gonna lose more money. The only person you can trust is me, because look what I did. I paid your mortgage off.
Having put Shakespeare on edge, Moore begins transferring his assets out of harm's way. In January, she gets him to give her $250,000, money she says she will pass on to the IRS, and she makes a token payment.
I believe at that time the IRS is given a check, but it's not for $250,000. It might be for $20,000.
The rest of the cash is hers. Next, she targets his home and the IOUs that are owed to him.
She tells Abraham, listen, you need to get out of it so that the IRS can't personally come after you.
Moore says he should sell everything. Luckily, she has a buyer in mind, Dee Dee Moore. In January 2009, she agrees to pay Shakespeare $655,000 for his $1.1 million mansion. She also agrees to pay him an additional $185,000 and gets more than $3.5 million in additional real estate and uncollected IOUs he's holding.
For every $1 of Abraham Shakespeare's, Miss Moore was going to pay him 5 cents. Now, that seems to be a pretty good investment, and on paper, it's a great investment.
For her, but she never even pays him. Moore doesn't stop there. Next, she targets more than $1 million that Shakespeare has in an annuity account. In early February, she files paperwork opening a company which she controls called Abraham Shakespeare, LLC. She says that if Shakespeare moves his money into this limited liability corporation, it's protected from his ex-girlfriend, Centauria Butler. Moore goes alone to a local Bank of America, where she gives then-manager Doug Hancock a different story for why she's opening the account.
She was talking about that she was doing it to help him pay his income tax debts.
Though the LLC is named after Shakespeare, Moore has control of its bank account. When she shows up the next day with the lotto winner to deposit his $1 million, he has questions.
She was very adamant, saying, am I going to be able to get to my money? I wanted to make sure that her being on the account wasn't going to keep him or restrict his access.
To settle Shakespeare's concerns, Moore has with her minutes of an LLC meeting, adding his name as a signer. She gives them to the bank, and he deposits his check. But when Shakespeare steps out, Dee Dee Moore has a special request. Saturday, October 25th, 2008. Just outside Memphis, Tennessee, in the quiet suburb of Olive Branch. Shortly after 7 o'clock in the evening, Carrie Brown, a trucking company manager, receives an alarming phone call. It's Joe Caronna, the husband of her close friend, Tina Caronna. He sounds worried.
He just called somewhat panicky and just said, "Have you talked to Tina today?" And I'm like, "No." "Has she called you today?" "No." "Joe, what's going on?"
Caronna explains that he last saw Tina around 10 o'clock that morning when she left home in her black Chevy Avalanche. She planned to run errands in preparation for a party later that evening. But she never came home, Caronna says, and she isn't answering her phone.
Well, I went into a straight panic because that's not like her, especially not to answer phone calls from him.
Tina Caronna is a 44-year-old financial executive and president of the Memphis Corvette Club. She is so well loved that friends and family immediately form a search party that very night.
They were thinking somebody had abducted her, so I just went looking for that black Avalanche. It was like a massive manhunt for Tina.
The mystery of Tina Caronna's disappearance would eventually reveal a sordid financial fraud scheme and murder plot. But just how did Tina and Joe Caronna, by all appearances a happy and successful couple, become entangled in this twisted tale? It's a story that begins decades earlier.
I don't know anybody that didn't love Tina. She was the kind of person that you had no choice but to love her, really.
Carrie Brown meets Tina in kindergarten. The two women stay tight through high school and college, and even get their first jobs together as tellers at a local bank.
Customers that adored her would wait until she got back from lunch until she helped them. She's just that kind of person. She was magnetic.
Although she does not have a degree in business or finance, Tina's infectious personality and strong work ethic propel her up the corporate ladder. Within a few years, she's working for the brokerage firm Payne Weber.
She could talk a heating blanket from an Eskimo. She could sell anything. She could make every customer that walked in there happy.
In early 1993, Tina meets her match in the charm department. One afternoon, while out shopping, Tina is swept off her feet by a smooth-talking shoe salesman.
She was like, "You're not going to believe this, but I just met somebody at the shoe carnival, and we're going out."
Joe Caronna is a manager at the store.
He knew all the right buttons to push with Tina. Lots of attention, flowers all the time, gifts all the time, really winning her over.
Less than a year after meeting, the two are married. But shortly after the wedding, Tina pushes her new husband for a career change. She thinks he can do better than slinging shoes.
So that's when she came to her dad and said, "Will you take Joe in and train him the insurance business?"
Tina's dad, Jim Murphy, is an independent insurance agent. He's eager to teach his new son-in-law the ropes. Two of Joe Caronna's earliest clients are his elderly neighbors, Lake and Helen Sturtevant. Their son, David, remembers when Caronna first came to call on them.
He would come over to my parents' house and practice his sales pitch on them. Have a live somebody to tell about the product he was selling.
Because they adore Tina, the Sturtevants are willing to take a chance with her new husband. They agree to let Joe open up an annuity for them.
They thought it was a safe deal, and I think they thought they'd be helping out Tina by investing with them.
An annuity is a financial product that is often used to create a future revenue stream in retirement.
When you buy an annuity, you're buying an investment and you're expecting your money to grow in value, and it's really considered a safe investment. There's not a lot of risk involved with an annuity.
Joe Caronna's new career is off to a promising start. When American Greed returns, Caronna takes a high-stakes gamble with his family's fortune.
Joe loved to gamble. Joe and Tina both went to the casinos a lot.
No one ever knew how much money that he was spending at casinos.
Memphis, Tennessee, home of the legendary Beale Street, where 7 days a week there's always a party going on. And by 2006, the good times are rolling for Joe and Tina Caronna. That year, Tina takes an executive job with the financial firm Cantor Fitzgerald. As a vice president in the loan department, she's paid nearly $250,000 a year, according to her good friend, Carrie Brown.
Everyone knew that she was successful and was doing well, but she would never take the credit for all that. She'd be like, oh, Joe's done so well, you know, in the insurance business. He's doing so well.
But she's being far too humble. Most of Joe's clients are Tina's friends. She often accompanies her husband on sales calls.
Anybody that knew Tina would go with them, but that was his bread and butter, people who trusted Tina, therefore they could trust Joe.
With years of experience under his belt, Joe now works out of his own office and away from the watchful eye of his father-in-law. Carrie Brown eventually becomes one of his clients. She purchases a life insurance policy through Joe and considers opening up a $20,000 annuity with him as well.
I said, you know, I've got some money invested in an annuity. It just would make more sense if I put it with someone that I know. So why don't I move my money to you? And Tina was like, it's a great idea. Of course you can move your money to Joe.
But rather than make a phone call and transfer money over to the life insurance company, Joe curiously tells Carrie to make out a check to his business.
He said, just call your broker and tell him that you want a check in full made out to you. You'll sign that check over to me, and then I will invest it with Allianz in the same type of annuity.
Carrie doesn't think twice about the transaction. Joe is the husband of her good friend, Tina.
Complete 100% trust. She was involved. I mean, she was there. She helped sell it.
With his insurance business thriving, Joe picks up a new hobby, collecting classic cars. Within a few years, Joe buys a 1971 Chevelle, a 1969 Daytona yellow Corvette, and a couple of Porsches.
He liked to be seen in them. He was very proud of his cars.
Joe becomes so enamored of his cars that he and Tina join the exclusive Memphis Corvette Club. It's a defining moment, says Tina's younger brother, Scott Murphy.
Joe was all about the appearance of what you had. He was looking to hang out with the people that were in a different class that he felt like had money.
Joe and Tina moved to a bigger house in Cordova, a quiet town in the eastern suburbs of Memphis. The couple are high rollers at the casinos in Tunica, Mississippi, where Joe plays fast and loose with their cash.
Joe loved to gamble. Joe and Tina both went to the casinos a lot.
She hit 10 grand one time, and she was like, it's so much fun. I mean, we're addicted, you know, because we're winning all this money.
But what Tina doesn't yet realize is that, like any addiction, there can be hell to pay. Joe is losing a ton of money. It's not uncommon for him to drop several $1,000s playing blackjack and high-end slots.
He won money, but not enough to cover what he was losing. At one point, I think he was down $90,000.
Next on American Greed, Joe Caronna loves life in the fast lane. But will he drive his friends, family, and clients into a financial ditch?
I never really thought he would try to steal money from the family.
In Memphis, Joe and Tina Caronna appear to have the perfect marriage. But what Tina doesn't know is that their lifestyle is propped up by fraud. Los Angeles, California, June 22, 2005. In the early morning hours, traffic detective Nelson Hernandez gets a call for what looks like a hit and run in the upscale neighborhood of Westwood.
There was a man in the alley, dead, and they wanted me to come out and investigate it.
A middle-aged man lies face up in the center of the alley. There's a bicycle a few feet away. The front wheel is off, as though the man had been changing a tire when he was hit by a car.
We checked the tire and it was hard. He had air in it. And then the other thing was, well, if he's gonna work on the tire, why would he put his helmet on top of the tire? It just didn't make any sense. And why would he stop here in darkness? Why would he just walk the bike down to the end of the alley where there's light?
The man has nothing in his pockets except for 2 photo IDs.
So it was very clear that someone wanted to tell us who this guy was.
His name is Kenneth McDavid. Hernandez notes that McDavid's clothes are covered in grease, most likely from the bottom of a car, unusual for a hit and run.
Usually pedestrians will get hit and then they will either get pushed to the side of the road or will flip over the car and they will land someplace else. They would not have all that grease from the undercarriage. So there were a few things there that just didn't look right.
Once the sun comes up, Hernandez combs the area for witnesses and inquires about any surveillance video taken that night. One of the stores on the block has several cameras in the alley.
We looked at the video that this camera had captured, and we could see taillights of vehicles entering the alley and traveling southbound in the alley.
The camera doesn't capture the victim, but there's something suspicious about one of the cars that enters the alley.
The brake lights came on, all lights went out. The lights came on 5 minutes later, and the vehicle just drove off. It appeared to be a Ford Taurus or a Mercury Sable station wagon.
He can't make out the license plate number. All he has is the possible make and model of the car and the dead man's IDs. He follows the only lead he has, McDavid's last known address, 1843 Cherokee Lane.
We made a follow-up to that address. We talked to the manager and she said, yeah, he used to live here. He used to live on the 4th floor.
Ken McDavid played classical piano and worked as a disc jockey in his hometown of Sacramento. He moves to LA to try his hand at writing screenplays. He can't make it as a screenwriter and eventually becomes homeless. The building manager at 1843 Cherokee Lane tells Detective Hernandez what she knows about McDavid. An older woman named Helen Golay takes him off the streets and pays his bills for many months.
She appeared to be a well-to-do type person. Why would this lady allow this supposedly homeless man to stay in her apartment for so many months?
Before Hernandez can track Golay down, he finds out that she's gone to the morgue, claiming to be McDavid's fiancée. She identifies the body and requests that he be cremated. Then things get stranger. Another woman, Olga Rutterschmidt, who claims to be McDavid's cousin, shows up at the police station asking for a copy of the police report.
Usually, when a family member comes to the station, they're hurting because their loved one died. So they want us to explain to them the report. Many cases, they cry and so on and so forth. And they have questions. Not in this case. They basically came in, got the copy, and out the door.
Rutterschmidt's cold, businesslike demeanor leaves a profound impression. And then, more red flags. Toxicology comes back. Ken McDavid's body has large amounts of 2 prescription medications, including a sleep aid, Ambien.
Why would you be taking a sleeping pill if you're going to go out and ride your bike?
Hernandez begins to wonder if Ken McDavid's death was no accident, if someone set him up. But if it's murder, what's the motive?
It was just frustrating. I just didn't have enough to be able to solve this case.
Time passes with no new leads. 2 months after Ken McDavid's death, a life insurance claim comes into Money, Mutual of New York. Ed Webster is an investigator assigned to the case. The claim is for $1 million.
The beneficiaries were Olga Rutterschmidt and Helen Golay. The contract was written in the context that Kenneth McDavid was a businessman. These two women were his business partners in a company called HKO Associates, which, is an acronym for Helen, Kenneth, and Olga. They claimed that he made about $60,000 in annual income, and that if he passed, their business would be adversely affected.
Ed Webster soon discovers that Helen and Olga told police that they were McDavid's fiancée and cousin, not business partners. Something doesn't feel right. Webster flies to LA to try to get some answers.
There had been a medical examiner's report, and when I looked at that, it was the first time I saw Kenneth McDavid represented as a homeless man, which flew in the face of all the documents that we had at underwriting.
And there is more.
The address that was listed as his home address was actually Helen's address in Santa Monica. The address that was listed on the application as his business address was Olga's address in West Hollywood. So those were clearly misrepresented.
It looks like Helen and Olga are definitely in business together. The question is, what kind of business? They take in a homeless man, apply for $1 million life insurance policy on him, lie about their relationships to him, and now he's dead. Webster tries to schedule a meeting with Helen Golay and Olga Rutterschmidt to ask them about Ken McDavid. To his surprise, all he gets is doors slammed in his face.
Neither of these two women would speak with me, ever. They would never call me back. They left cards in the mailbox, I screamed from the sidewalk, I did everything. And they just flat out refused to talk to me. Their expectation was to collect $1 million in life insurance proceeds. Answering my questions would certainly be one step towards fulfilling that goal, and they just wouldn't do it.
The two women's reaction makes Webster even more suspicious. He decides it's time to talk to the LAPD. When he and Detective Hernandez put the evidence they found together, they're confident there's more to Ken McDavid's death.
Why would these ladies be taking life insurance policies on a guy that appeared to be homeless?
Hernandez shows Webster the grainy surveillance video taken of the alley. As they start to piece the puzzle together, the two women who come across as nice old grannies are beginning to look like cold-blooded killers.
They paid a lot of money in premiums for $1 million worth of life insurance. And they paid a lot of money for rent and housing. So if you take all of that in mind, the only way that they could capitalize on their investment is if he died.
Next on American Greed, a coincidence that's too close for comfort for police reveals another victim of the killer grannies. In Los Angeles, Detective Nelson Hernandez investigates a hit and run in a Westwood alley. The victim, Ken McDavid, was once a homeless man until two older women take him in and put him up in an apartment. But a puzzle is unraveling, and now what once appeared to be two grannies lending a helping hand is starting to look suspicious. The two women file for benefits on two insurance policies they take out on McDavid. The total, $1 million. Detective Hernandez talks about the case with a colleague, Detective Willman, when they make a startling discovery.
I said, Lee, this just didn't make any sense. I got this guy in the alley, and now I get this insurance guy telling me that these two old ladies in their 70s have insurance policies on this guy totaling $1 million.
He had mentioned that the guy was in an alley, got hit by a car, and had life insurance policies. I'm thinking in my mind, hey, I had this before too. I walked back to where we keep our unsolved fatals and our cold cases. Well, back in November of '99, this is who I was dealing with.
Detective Willman's victim is Paul Vados. In 1999, Vados, a homeless man, is found dead in an alley, an apparent victim of a hit and run. Two older ladies claim to be next of kin. In July 1993, 49-year-old Linda Curry lies in intensive care at Samaritan Hospital in Southern California.
She got very, very sick, violently sick, diarrhea, throwing up, taken to the hospital. They had no idea what happened to her. They had no idea what happened to her.
I mean, she went through some tests and procedures that are pretty uncomfortable, trying to determine she got cancer, she had this, she had that, she had a virus, and the medical community was unable to determine what is it that's causing it.
The more diseases that are ruled out, the more realistic a frightening possibility becomes. Linda Curry has been poisoned. Law enforcement officers come to her bedside to ask questions no one wants to think about.
If somebody were trying to do something to you, if they were trying to poison you, any idea who would try to do that?
Well, the only person I could think of that would have a motive to do it would be Paul. And the only motive I can think of is money.
Linda Curry, born Linda Kincaid, has never been lucky in love. She is married and divorced twice and has multiple long-term relationships with other men, but they never seem to work out.
The only reason I didn't get married to Linda was because she'd been divorced twice. I've been divorced once, and I'm saying I was always real leery about divorce again.
It's easy to say I'm not ready, wasn't ready. But in retrospect, I keep thinking, well, why not, you know? She was just perfect. Maybe she was too nice to me. She's always had that beautiful smile. Now that I think about it, I don't think I've ever seen her frown.
Never one to give up hope, even in the face of bitter experience, the sunny 45-year-old soon has a new flame.
I do remember her calling me up and saying that she had met a guy, and he was such a smart man.
Paul Curry works as a nuclear engineer at the San Onofre nuclear plant, where Linda works as an administrator. And from the beginning, Linda seems smitten. When Mary Siebold meets him with her boyfriend Tom, it seems there's nothing Paul Curry cannot do.
Tom and I went over to the house, and Linda had this beautiful white piano, and Tom kind of said, yeah, who plays the piano? And Paul says, well, I could play. What do you want to hear? Ragtime? You want to hear classical? What do you want to hear? And he sits down, he starts pounding out some music like he was Elton John, you know?
And that's not all. Paul Curry is a member of Mensa, a gourmet cook.
This is Jeopardy!
And even claims to win tens of thousands of dollars as a contestant on Jeopardy. Mary can see that Linda is in love, but Mary doesn't find him quite as endearing.
You know, you meet Paul, and he lets you know how smart he is pretty much right off the bat. You say something that's not quite right, maybe something about history, something about anything. He's there to correct you nicely, but he will correct you. And so, you know, you're kind of taken back like, he's pretty smart. And Linda likes that because that's kind of showing off what she now has.
Ricky Rycraft is Linda's niece, and she says that her family has some misgivings about Paul as well.
The first impression we had of him was kind of standoffish, and I don't think we lost that impression. I'm speaking for all the family, I guess, when I say we. We had this sense that he was standoffish and not really interested in getting too connected to us.
But he is connected to Linda. He moves into her new house in an upper-middle-class neighborhood of San Clemente, California. And it appears that Linda is willing to give commitment one more try. In September 1992, the two are married. Linda may believe that she is finally on the road to happiness. But shortly after the marriage, Linda tells her friend Mary something strange.
She said, you know, Paul wants to take out $1 million life insurance policy on me. What do you think? I said, well, you know, you're married now. I said, get one on him, he gets one on you. I said, so you're both covered, sure. He goes, no. He says, because I'm older, that I should just have it, you know, for me, because I'm older. And I said, Linda, are you crazy? No, you get it on both. Why, after, you know, a few months of marriage, he's looking of a life insurance policy? But that boing is a red flag in my little brain at that point.
For better or worse, her husband Paul becomes the beneficiary of more than $300,000 in life insurance policies and thousands of dollars more in retirement benefits from her employer, Southern California Edison. But for now, Paul treats Linda like a queen.
Linda had called me and said that Paul was kind of experimenting with all these exotic salad dressings. And what a good husband he was, how he would go upstairs and pour her a nice hot bath. And he'd tell her, now you gotta come up, take a nice bath, I want you to soak. And so she was very proud of that. And so that's something that never really I thought anything about other than, well, that's nice.
Or is it? Less than a year after they wed, Linda falls sick, violently sick. And she's hospitalized with a mysterious gastrointestinal pain. To law enforcement and to family and friends, red flags abound, and they all center around Paul.
Any other periods of illness before this hospitalization?
Health is a horse, always health is a horse. I take good care of myself, I eat good. I've never been sick.
When former boyfriend Bruce Brandt visits Linda at the hospital, he is confronted with the suspicions.
It was in those visits to the hospital that she told me that, he was making these funny sauces and weird, meals for her that then she'd get ill. And her friends were saying, that there could be something going on there.
Once in the hospital, Linda's condition seems to stabilize, though her pain persists. And one evening, the nurse taking care of Linda, Sherry Bundy, discovers something suspicious.
I medicated her, and at that time I reassessed her, got her comfortable, checked her IV, and when I was looking up at the IV bag, I noticed that the IV bag was cloudy. I have never seen a cloudy one, never. And not to appear too alarmed, I ran down, I got a new IV bag. I came back and calmly hung it up. And I took the bag back to the nursing station and called my supervisor because it's not normal to have a cloudy solution in there.
The contaminated IV bag is taken to a lab. And though they cannot immediately determine what has been added to it, Bundy knows something isn't right.
When I called the next day to find out how she was and what had transpired, they told me that they couldn't tell me much, but there was something definitely wrong with the IV bag and that she was in intensive care.
Linda's condition worsens. What was once extreme discomfort is now a fight for her life.
And I just remember how she looked. She was in ICU and I got to see her and how she looked, and she was so frail and she looked bad, very bad.
If her turn for the worse is the result of a contaminated IV bag, who could possibly be responsible? Linda's friends immediately think of one person.
When we found out that her IV bag had been contaminated at the hospital while she was there, I told Linda at that time, I said, good God, Linda, who do you think's trying to kill you? And she didn't believe it was Paul. I said, there's nobody else that you have exposure to.
The hospital staff suspects the same thing.
Every time I was in the room to assess her, Paul was in the room with her. No one else.
Under the circumstances, the hospital decides that at no time should Paul be left unsupervised in his own wife's intensive care room. But has the damage already been done?